welcome to Adventures in Life. I am Earl Beecher, your host. Our guest has been kind enough to remain and do a second show. I begged her and she said, I will be happy to do that, Earl. Her name is Mona Brooks. She is an internationally acclaimed art educator who didn't intend to be an educator. She'll tell us about that. Who's been a consultant to schools and museums worldwide. I think that's very impressive. I want to pursue that a little bit, Mona. And she's the founder of the Monart Drawing Schools. And she has done 2 books. And we concentrated the first show on drawing with children. The second show will deal with adult drawing. It's called Drawing for Older Children and Teens. And there's a story behind this cover, is that right?
True.
Would you share the story with us and tell us a little bit about how this book differs from the other? Mm-hmm. And also, are these books available in bookstores?
All major bookstores carry them, and they'll order, any bookstore will order it for you.
Any bookstore can get it for you. Okay. Now that we've got that covered,
yes.
Let's hear about the cover.
Well, this particular is the original. She let me keep it. And Kindred Gottlieb, 17 years old, this is a different story than the other cover. I actually chose Kindred, let's make a cover. I'm going to do this other book. And Kindred first came to Monart at 9 years old. And she was just a regular kid, you know. It was just another one of those stories where she got the information, she became confident about drawing. She's actually near 30 now and is going to, and finished art school, and she's a sculptress. But at 17 years old.
She finished art school. In other words, the Monart schools go up to an age level or what, and then they go on? How does this work?
People from all ages, 4 years old through 90 years old, come to Monart. But if you want to go get a degree at a regular art college, then they go off and do that too. They do both.
You don't grant degrees with Monart?
No, not at the moment. Maybe someday.
You may be accredited someday.
I'm running around looking at what art schools offer. And
do you work in association with some of the community colleges or universities or high schools or elementary schools?
I teach personally for 2 or 3 different colleges and give extended studies and give credit for my courses. But I don't work for any particular college. I work for Seattle Pacific sometimes University, sometimes Cal Lutheran University, and I give credit for my teacher training courses through their extended studies programs. But I'm talking about a girl who wanted to become an artist.
Professional artist.
Professional artist.
Right.
And she actually transitioned into becoming a sculptress. But this particular drawing, she knew she was going to do the cover of my new book. And she wanted to draw a cat. So we got a still life, we bought the vase, we bought the flowers, something very similar to this. We got the pillow, and I had lots of cats. I'm also a cat lover and a bird lover because they don't
All right.
Okay, so we could, of course, we could never get my cat to sit still in that pillow. So we put a big rock in the pillow to make the depression of where a cat would be.
To give the pillow the...
Yeah.
Okay.
So she did this still life with rock as opposed to cat. And then she looked at a lot of pictures of cats, and she made up the cat because no cat was going to sit still for her. And she was very pleased with it. And I have another picture of hers that shows the skill level she came to. This was one of the very first times that she did a life drawing. And if your camera can pick up these 3 kids that I hired for models, they were Ojai junior high school kids back at the time she did this at 17 years old, and you can see the likeness.
Now, what media is that?
These both are chalk pastels, and the fine detail comes, I use a lot of chalk pastel pencils.
Okay.
They have very fine points.
Yes.
So she can get that kind of fine detail in the faces, and she became a very skilled drawer, in other words, and that leads into, why did I have to write another book? I wrote this book for children, and I thought that they would all go off to art schools when they became teens, or adults come to Monart. But again, I thought that when they got to a certain skill level, they could go. They didn't want to go somewhere else. They wanted to stay at Monart. So they challenged me to extend my programs into teens and adults. And basically, that's why the book says teens and older children, meaning Monart.
My age.
Well, yeah. And so
Okay.
it goes both ways. The 4-year-old who starts at Monart can do college-level artwork by 10 or 11 years old. and I couldn't keep them in the kiddie classes anymore. They
Oh, no.
wanted in the adult classes. And
Yes.
the adults wanted to come to the kids' classes because they felt more comfortable there. So adults can go to any class they want to at Mona.
You don't actually mix the children with the adults in the drawing, do you?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Do you find
love
they
it.
started...
They both love it.
I get immediate mental pictures of the people in, shall we say, retirement homes, rest homes,
Right.
who need something to do,
Right.
and they could be drawing
Absolutely.
and have children there with them, the
Absolutely.
grandchildren and things.
Right. I have
Oh,
lots of
what a
grandmothers
wonderful-
come with their grandchildren.
yes.
And come. And we're talking about adults who absolutely think it's impossible. They cannot draw. And in 6 months, they're doing incredible artwork. And the child that works at their level. Well, Grandma gets to the point where she doesn't want to be in the 5-year-old class anymore. She wants to go to the adult class.
Yes.
So I had to expand my programs into adult classes for beginners who become very skilled, and then I had to have skilled. And then we have these 10 or 11-year-old kids. That's why the book says for older children with skill level, they can go into the adult classes.
Let me
so
ask-
this
let
girl
me
was in
ask
the
you
adult
something.
classes at 14 years old.
The children have more freedom of expression, less inhibitions. But when you get an adult in the class, do you find that their freedom of expression just explodes and that they advance very fast?
Well, Earl, this is a really interesting question because, again, I learned as I, was forced into these new
Yes.
positions. And when an adult, and I'm talking about hundreds, thousands now, come and say, I took an art class once, but I dropped out after 4 weeks. They were overwhelmed, you see. So we can't talk, when we're talking about what happens at Monart, it's so different. They come in to an environment where there's no right and wrong way to draw. They don't draw for the teacher because the teachers at Monart are not allowed to make any comments about drawings.
Non-judgmental.
Totally non-judgmental. There is
Wonderful.
no comparisons. You can walk around the room and look at everybody's drawings and learn from each other, but you cannot say a word. No critiquing. You
Okay.
draw for yourself, not the teacher.
Are words of praise permitted?
For the whole group. You guys are really cooking. Boy, I love to see what's happening here today, but not your drawing is good. Because the day
Your drawing is good, and I have no comment about yours.
Well, that's what happens, you see.
Yeah, right.
There's a wonderful book out by the guy. You see this movie, Smilia, Sense of Snow, by Peter Hoag?
No, I haven't seen that.
Well, he's from Greenland, Copenhagen area, and this man has written a book called Borderliners, and it's about the view of a child from what it's like to be taught by teachers. And there is a whole scenario in there about the art teacher who put the star on the kid's drawing. And this was not productive.
and did not put the star on the other
No,
kid's
for the
drawing.
kid that got the star, it caused problems because he was
Oh.
always afraid he wouldn't get another one. And if he didn't get one tomorrow, then it wasn't good today, it was bad. And blah, 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 blah. And there you go, you see. So we just eliminate that whole thing, forget it. So
Well-
when an adult comes to Monart, they have to go through this, oh my gosh.
They have to release themselves.
I get to start at 0, learn how to see through the basic elements of shape, get to draw anyway. Don't have to like everything I do. We give way too much false praise in this country for, it does not help esteem. If you tell me I hate my drawing and I try to talk you into liking it, I have robbed you of any ability to solve problems. The school systems are having big problems with this, you see. It's more important to help you accept that artists don't like everything they do. You don't have to like that drawing. What don't you like about it? What do you want to change? Help you become successful. Now you have self-esteem.
Well, you know, now you touched on something. What do you want to change? In painting, when you get advanced, like in oil paintings,
Yeah.
you can change any part of it you want
Right.
anyway.
Well, you can do the same in drawing if somebody teaches you the tricks.
Oh, we'll come back to that right after this pause for a public service announcement. There's some tricks.
Of course.
Okay, stay with us. We'll be right back. welcome back. Our guest is Mona Brooks, and I want to be sure I get the title right on these books, Mona. It's Drawing with Children.
Correct.
And Drawing for Older Children and Teens.
Correct.
So that there's any confusion.
The first book is for very little children. The parent, the teacher, is drawing with them.
With them.
Whereas the second book can be used by a 10-year-old and up, so it's drawing for
them to
older children.
Okay. Now, you were sharing with me some stories about people who had been discouraged in art classes,
Right.
left in tears,
Yes.
never tried again.
Yes, I get all of them.
I took lessons from an instructor that I thought was just wonderful, but he had somebody in tears at least twice a class, and so I'm sure there are a lot of our viewers out there who've had this experience.
Yes.
You were going to tell us two things about how you can overcome that and get a second shot at it in life, but the real key is to know some tricks.
Well, yes, it's just like any other subject. You know, it's like you wouldn't learn dance without learning the basic steps. You wouldn't learn driving without the basic involvement of the different pieces of the equipment. There is no subject. So drawing isn't any different. It's just a subject that's teachable. And you have to learn the basics, okay? So now for instance, one of my tricks is that I know that people become too dependent on erasers when they're drawing. And their eyes never become accurate because they're always aware, oh, I can always read. So they want to draw in pencil. Well, guess what happens when you come to Monart, even if you're 90 years old, you have to learn how to draw in black ink. Because what happens...
You can't change it.
You can't change it. And what does that do for you? It says, hey, did you like the way you rode a bicycle the first time?
No, I fell in the ditch.
But you were willing to get back on it, weren't you?
Yes.
So it's the same thing.
But if I draw it in black ink...
You don't have to like your first drawing. This is ridiculous, just like the bicycle. But if you draw in black ink, you will look like this before you commit. And you will train your eyes. And then 3 months later, I'll teach you how to use all this other equipment.
Oh, okay.
And you won't be
think
struggling.
before you
So
touch the paper.
Correct.
Or else you're going to have a big pile of papers you've discarded there.
So you're going to learn to be more accurate by learning to draw with ink. So what if you don't like everything that well? You didn't have to like roller skating the first few times either. So you just get to where you say, hey, I'm going to learn how to look. I'm not going to be able to erase. Then after you start using all this different equipment, I'm going to show you that you can use marker on top of color. So you do something in black marker and you don't like it. You can take a white colored pencil and put it over the top. You can't put whiteout on it because whiteout doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Whiteout, if you try to put marker over whiteout, will turn a weird color. But you can take a... So there are tricks, and some people are offended by that. You know, you're not supposed to have tricks in art. Well,
why not?
Then semantic. Use a different word. There are certain things to learn about the media and the equipment.
Can we substitute the word techniques?
Absolutely. So what does it mean? It means that if you come in and you're crying the first week as an adult because you're so humiliated. I had a man once who was shaking and sweating. And all I had to do was tell him what I just told you. Did you like the way you wrote a bicycle? Hey, so what if you don't like your first drawing? Go ahead and, you know, get your knee pads on and let's go, you know. And 3 weeks later, he's doing stuff that he just can't even believe because he was freed up from the stress, you know. And there are two comments I get the most. One, somebody said something to me and I never drew again. It could be to your 9-year-old brother and you were 6. It could be your art teacher and you were 85. It doesn't matter. Somebody said something. And the other one, amazingly, is the teacher drew on my paper and I never drew again. Never drew again.
The teacher drew on my paper?
Did the teacher know that you didn't want them to? Oh, no, I wouldn't tell the teacher that. That was a teacher. What did you do? I left the class. And then I started crying when I got in the car.
What is so wrong with the teacher coming over and saying, look, you need to do this?
I take another piece of paper and put it next to it and say, you know, you could do this or that. Why do I have to draw on the child's paper or the child in the adult? I don't care how old you are.
I could just see some student turning around and looking at you and saying, get your cotton-picking hands off my paper.
Well, I actually had, that's another reason why I had to go into more the older classes because they wanted to stay at Monart. They liked this non-competitive, non-judgmental place where they could draw for themselves.
Yes.
And they wanted to go further. So this
So the
adult,
only critic they have is themselves.
If they like it, it's great. So this adult was one who came in and thought that she could not draw. You know, here's a little figurine that she was drawing from. And I seriously cannot remember, but there was something to do with the area over here where she had already committed herself to a different color. I think it was dark green, and she didn't like it. And she put colored pencil on top of the marker and made it into yellow instead. So that's what I mean about technique. She loved this drawing when she was done with it. And you know, the same thing with if you're drawing this African lady here, and by the way, this gets again into this integrated studies in the high school, junior high school area.
That has a lot of beautiful detail in the neckwear and things.
Right. This takes a lot of time.
Oh,
so
yeah.
what about the kid who can't concentrate in school and learns the patience of doing something like that? They'll turn around and apply that kind of patience to their schoolwork.
So it applies to every subject in school.
It carries over into other subjects.
It carries over.
So this kid, again, he starts at a young age. Well, by 14, he is capable of doing very sophisticated drawing.
That is sophisticated.
And he can learn how to draw with a very light H pencil and make all of his corrections first before he commits to a 6B. So again, it's learning technique. It's learning information. This is a cute story. This is the 5-year-old who did the cover of my very first book. And she is now in her 20s. And this is a quickie of her mother. I think she did this in about 40 minutes. And she's at Pratt Institute in New York now. She's going to be an artist. And I met her when she was 3. So I'm seeing, I don't have classes to try to make people into artists. That's not my agenda.
You're not turning out professionals, but you're turning out people.
The amazing number that
You're opening them up
to do that is really exciting.
Okay.
Here's another one at 5 years old. Did a little still life. You see, with the information that she learned how to do that. And here she is at 19 years old doing a portrait, and you can see the skill level she came to. So this is to say, did learning the basics stifle the creativity? No way.
No, it just opens up a way of
Yeah.
expression.
So learning the information and the basics, she's actually really a little older than that now, and she has graduated from Santa Cruz, and she's an artist now and beginning to be an art teacher.
How has the computer impacted what you're doing?
Oh, this is exciting. 10 years ago, a professor at Maryland State University in the computer art department came to me and said, I've been using your first book with
drawing with children.
With children, and I'm doing all the lessons, because see, they're very practical step-by-step lessons for young children. I'm having all my computer art students go through this series of lessons first, and I got to see the results of all those lessons in computer art as opposed to hand-generated art. And here we are 15 years later, my art students are asking me, where do I go to school and how do I learn to be an illustrator? And I'm doing research and finding out that if you don't know computer art and how to generate images with computers, you're extremely limited in the illustration field now. So they can take this information with the updated equipment. I saw somebody the other day in a room with the equipment, 5 people operating the whole thing in huge booths with glass, and you know, the art director.
Almost virtual reality before you're through, huh?
And this artist was creating through computer-generated. So they can do skillful drawings now. 15 years ago, I would have said, this kind of artwork doesn't really relate to computers. Today I can say, boy, you can do extremely skillful, very realistic artwork with computers now. The technology has just gone, you know, into a whole realm where these students need to take those kind of courses, and they want to, you know.
So this builds where the basics leave off. You've mastered the basics.
Right.
Now you can take the basics and learn how to do them in a computer, and just with that.
Right. And the high school art teacher is being challenged, too, because the money was all taken out of the schools, and the high school art teachers, I meet them all over the country, and Monart is actually becoming international. I'm beginning to get interns from other countries. And when you deal with other countries, they have art programs different than we do. But in the United States...
How do they differ, Mona?
Well, even in the United States, you can go up near the Canadian border in the state of Washington, and they have tons of money for art, and every elementary school has art teachers, and they have art docents. You can go somewhere in California, and you can't find an art teacher in the entire elementary system and stuff. You know, so it depends on the state and the politics and the money and, you know, all of that, right. But there is still the reality that once you get into the realm of a child knowing and an administration knowing that the arts teach other subjects, then they'll put it back in. And it's going back in everywhere. It's going back in all across the country.
Well, I should think the minute you try to start drawing something with a computer, you have mastered the computer, you've got hand-eye skill
Right.
coordination, you've got math, you've got everything
Right.
involved there.
Right. And so if you add the hand-generated art as well, that's where you get a whole nother realm of problem-solving, critical thinking skills. Well, the high school art teacher is finding out that it's a dumping ground in some places where the students who are the problem people are being thrown into the art classes.
Oh,
See?
On that happy note, let's pause and we'll come back and discuss that more fully. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Our guest is Mona Brooks, the founder of the Mona Art Schools. Mona, you were telling me how the schools take some of the problem children and put them into Mona Art classes, and how you've worked even with street gang children.
Right.
Tell us.
During the Governor Brown Arts Council years, I got a 3-year grant to work with several different kinds of kids, but also a group of 60 gang kids, and see what this would do with them. They were non-readers, they were failing in school, and of course I was not the only person working with them. There was other programs going on too, but the director said that Mona Art was just one of the major things, because when I went in there, and fortunately I used to be a probation officer and I'm comfortable with gang
have a
kids.
very colorful background.
Right.
I learn
So
more
I'm
about you all the
comfortable with
time.
them. I go in there and 2 of them want to draw out of the 60. And
The other 58, you know,
Forget it.
baby
No.
stuff?
Right. So,
Okay.
you know, again, the way, the non-competition, you draw for yourself, you can do, you know, you don't have to draw if you don't want to. Here's some art books and read, but you can't bother anybody else. And by the 3rd or 4th week, when the 2 that were so successful started drawing, and you have to draw things they want to draw. I mean, they were drawing 1950 cut-down Chevys, and they were drawing, you know,
Well, of
karate
course.
guys, or, you know, whatever. And 10, then 20 of them, then 30 of them. At the end of the year, all 60 kids, suits, ties, you know, decked out, their art show in a big bank on Sunset Boulevard, and they all had 2 pieces in it, and they were just totally proud. And this is what is an exaggerated, kind of like, it shows you that you're talking about motivate. The kids are turned off to school. Here's something that they can be creative. It pulled them in. Now you start reading the books. You start drawing some kind of Maasai woman with all of her jewelry, and then you read about them, and then and pretty soon they were. I also developed a whole bunch of ESL teachers who were working with kids who didn't speak
I was going to say,
English.
the language barrier would have nothing to do with
Nothing to
art
do with
and
it.
self-expression.
Walked into a school, taught in English, and the teacher comes to me and says, do you know that those 2 tables of Vietnamese refugees have not done anything for 2 months? They've been sitting there, and they just followed all of your directions because it's so visual.
They
All of the
understood.
they understood what was going on. I'm demonstrating, I'm showing, I'm giving resource materials, and they all produced pictures just like everybody else. And more than that, you learn your primary language through visual cues. If Mama tells you 15 times you want some milk and pour this white stuff, you learn it's milk. If drawing teacher tells you, then we're going to draw the eye, now we're going to draw, today we do a bear, next day we do this, then we're always drawing the eye, they learn the word eye. So they actually learn their secondary language the same way they learn a primary. They're totally immersed in learning it. So you can teach Mona Art and you're automatically an ESL teacher.
Our guest is Mona Brooks. The locations of her schools is available through the website, or you can call her. Both the website and the telephone number will appear in the credits at the end of the show. Mona, there's so many applications here. I just feel like we've touched the tip of the iceberg. There's just every time that I talk to you about something, you say, "Oh yes," and then a whole new subject opens up.
It's so exciting. 20 years, and I'm just as excited today as I was 20 years ago.
I can feel the excitement.
Yeah.
And I certainly want to thank you for being our guest on Adventures in Life today. And thank you for joining us for Adventures in Life, and please join us soon again.